Hello, I'm Les Miller, off for another video. This time we're going to talk about the life cycle of a marriage, or you could call it marriage from a man's point of view, the birth, death, resurrection of a marriage, whatever you want to use to describe it. In a previous video on my Mr. Les YouTube channel, I mentioned how one of my favorite secular channels is Alternate History Hub. This time I want to highlight another favorite secular channel who have provided me with hours and hours of entertainment, Lavi and Ollie. Right now they are on a trip around the world by motorcycle, and I've been really enjoying traveling with them. I'm at the point in my own life now where I think I'd almost rather watch YouTube videos by individual people having adventures like this, and also spiritual videos, of course, because I make spiritual videos. I'd rather do all that than watch some big blockbuster Hollywood movie, you know? It's more fun. But, you know, that's just me. It's where I am. So today, marriage advice. I've been married almost 37 years. Want to offer not so much lessons from my own life, but a Bible study that I hope will be of value to you. We're actually going to take a look at a fair amount of Bible verses today. You can see all my post-it notes. I'll try to go as quick as I can, but it's going to be a rather long video, but please stay with me for the whole thing, even if you have to watch it in a couple of parts, because I think it's going to be something that you're really going to get a lot out of, that will help you, whether you're married, whether you're about to get married, whether you're hoping to get married. I hope this is something that can do you good. So let's have a prayer, because this is a Christian video. We're going to ask God to be with us. Dear Lord, thanks for a chance to share this information. I pray your Spirit will help us to draw good things out of what are actually some of the Bible's worst stories of the failures of human beings. But I pray we can find good things, put them together, and help people to understand the life cycle, the process that human relationships go through. So please be with us now. In the name of Jesus, amen. Okay, first text, Genesis chapter 34, verses 2 and 3. And I mentioned in my prayer there some of the worst stories of the Bible, what we're going to look at. And the first one here, the rape of Jacob's daughter Dinah. So here's verse 2. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and violated her. Okay, bad story. What good thing can we find? Verse 3. His soul was strongly attracted to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the young woman and spoke kindly to the young woman. This is usually, in most human relationships, the first step in the process. Man sees a woman, he likes her for some reason. Yeah, usually it starts off with her looks, right? But it's got to go something deeper. It says his soul was attracted to her, like to her heart, to her as a person. He shouldn't have led off with the physical. He should have waited. But how was he trying to get her into his life now? How do men try to get women into their lives? He spoke kindly to her. This actually refers back in a way to what God said to Adam and Eve in Genesis chapter 3. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for dust you are, to dust you shall return. Verse 17, he says, cursed is the ground for your sake. Men, that's how they draw their self-esteem, right? Their purpose in life. It's usually their jobs, or it might be something like a hobby, something they live for, an activity, some way in which they are trying to make the world a better place. But for the woman, what do we get here? To the woman, God says, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Now, a lot of feminists, of course, don't like that phrase, he shall rule over you. I'm not going to talk a lot about that. We'll get into the idea of wives submitting in a few minutes. But what I want to talk about now is this idea, your desire shall be for your husband. There's a way in which women look to men for emotional fulfillment. Sort of in the same way men look to their quest, their purpose in life. It's like a woman's purpose in life is to be his woman, to help him. And she draws this self-esteem from her. And you can see this all through secular music. So many pop songs that are love songs talk about this in some way. The home is supposed to be a heaven on earth, by the man pouring out love for the woman, by the woman receiving that love and responding in kind. That's what it's really all about. We get some more comments in a way. Again, a verse many people misunderstand. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. Likewise, you husbands, dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. So number one, man's not good to his wife, God will stand in his way. Heirs together of the grace of life. Men and women, they see things differently. But that doesn't mean that a woman is somehow not qualified for heaven, right? How many times did Jesus use phrases like daughter of Israel, right? My daughter. He said those words to women. But here we have another version of speak kindly to her, giving honor to the wife. Again, feminists, maybe they don't like the word weaker there, but special treatment. A man pays attention to a woman, and if she likes it, she'll respond in kind. You know, a number of documentaries that I've watched over the years about relationships and sex and things like that. What I've heard, what I've seen, it's the woman who invites the man to sort of take it to the physical level, just some flirty little touch or something. That it's the woman who has the choice, you know, and that's why sometimes relationships can happen quite quickly. If a woman decides this is the man for me. I remember I met a lady once at a church conference, and she's in her mid to late 30s, I think, maybe early 40s. She tells me from the age of 12 years old up, every time she met a man, no matter how old he was, no matter what he looked like, was shaped like, or anything like that, the first thought as she looked him up and down was, could he be the one? We'll leave the physical off for now in any more discussion, but we will get back to that also. So in Judges chapter 16, verses 15 to 17, we get the story of Samson, and he's bearing his soul to Delilah. She screws him over. That's the bad part, but what's the good part? And it came to pass, when she pressed him daily with her words, and pressed him so that his soul was vexed to death, that he told her all his heart, and said to her, no razor has ever come upon my head, for I have been a Nazirite from my mother's womb. If I'm shaven, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. In relationships, as a man and a woman are getting closer, at some point, this man who presents himself to the world as this strong, macho man will open himself up to this one woman. He will confess his greatest weakness or his greatest fault or something. He'll make himself vulnerable in some way. I remember when I did that with the wife I'm married to, and how she gave me a note afterwards, how she felt honored when I did that. And thinking about this verse and thinking about, you know, a phrase I heard once on a documentary that women fall in love through sex, but men fall in love through trust. I understand it now. When a man makes this great confession, if the woman will basically respond to him by saying, you can trust me with your secret, I will be your cheerleader, then that's it. That's the woman he wants to marry. It does not matter how good she looks in a skirt, how good she looks in a bathing suit. That is the one he's going to want to spend the rest of his life with. But if she stomps on his heart, then that's it. Again, no matter how good she looks, it's over. There's no hope. Esther chapter 1. We get a situation where you could interpret it that way, although some people might say this guy was a bit of a chauvinist. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded, and they've got a number of names here for his eunuchs. They're hard to pronounce, so I'll just continue. 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus to bring Queen Vashti before the king, wearing her royal crown in order to show her beauty to the people and the officials, for she was beautiful to behold. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, brought by his eunuchs. Therefore the king was furious, and his anger burned within him. Now again, a shallow man, yeah, he's all about looks. But a man who does understand that inner beauty is what it's all about. We can draw a lesson from this text that relationships begin to decay when this woman who said, "You can trust me," suddenly, in some way, is not showing this beauty of character to him anymore, or at least he doesn't see it. Whether he's right or wrong to not see it is a different discussion. But this idea that suddenly if she stops being nice to him, then there's problems. There's several verses in the book of Proverbs that use the phrase a proud and contentious woman. And this is something that's very, very detrimental to a marriage. 2 Samuel chapter 6 is a story of a marriage that decayed to this way. David is bringing the Ark of the Covenant back into Jerusalem. It's a religious celebration. He wants God to be the star of the show, not him as the king. So he humbles himself, putting on a basic robe, not his kingly robe, but his wife. Here's what she has to say. And as the ark of the Lord came into the city, Michal, Saul's daughter, looked through a window and saw King David leaping and whirling before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. Verses 20 to 23. Then David returned to bless his household, and Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, "How glorious was the king of Israel today, uncovering himself in the eyes of the maids of his servants, as one of the base fellows shamefully uncovers himself." Bit of a mocking tone there, huh? So David said to Michal, "It was before the Lord who chose me instead of your father and all his house to appoint me ruler over the people of the Lord, over Israel. Therefore I will play music before the Lord, and I will be even more undignified than this, and will be humble in my own sight. But as for the maidservants of whom you have spoken, by them I will be held in honor." This whole dynamic here of these verses, it's so power-packed with all kinds of different lessons we can learn. This idea of when God works in someone's life, if people don't like it, you still got to stand for God. But also this idea that a woman, often, women are attracted to power, men are attracted to beauty. A woman who sees her man as some hero over her, that he's richer than her, stronger than her. She looks to his strength, any way in which she feels drawn to him. But then when she sees his weak side, if she decides to despise him like this despising is something very, very important to talk about, right? A lot of men, that's what happens as a marriage decays. They're saying in their hearts, "Where's that little sweetie? I want someone who'll be nice to me." And I've seen some second marriages in my own world around me where the second wife is nowhere near as good looking as the first wife. It's because the first wife wasn't as nice to him as he originally thought. But since the 1960s, with the increase in divorce and the transitioning from Western civilization being a Christian, Judeo-Christian based civilization to a secular civilization, we've seen this breaking of these deep family connections people have. So many of us live these screwed up lives as we grow up with our messed up families. And I think that's honestly one of the reasons why social media is so popular. We're all trying to be like David. Get a small amount of connection with as wide-ranging a number of people as possible. If I thought social media was all bad, I wouldn't be here. But it's just something to think about. God can still use the world as it is. Because when you think about Jesus, living the basic life of a human being, working in a carpentry shop, and then going off to travel and preach and teach, he transitioned also from deep connections with a small amount of people to as many connections as he possibly could get. We're going to get a verse now from just a few chapters over. Polygamy was a thing back then, so I don't know if you could say David cheated on his wife Michal. But interesting, that story about Michal, it ends with the fact that she had no children from that point forward. So maybe he had lost interest in her physically because of it. But he, of course, does cheat with a woman named Bathsheba. But I just want to get verse 9 of 2 Samuel chapter 11. It's very interesting. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of the Lord, and he did not go down to his house. So, background story. He cheats on his wife, cheats on this guy's wife, and she gets pregnant. He tries to cover it up by saying, hey, it's a guy in his army. He says, hey, come home, spend some time with your wife. It doesn't work because why? He sleeps at the gate of the palace. Why? I think the guy was a workaholic. This idea we have now called a desperate housewife, right? When a woman is unfulfilled in a marriage because the man is not paying attention to her the way he used to. That is also a big part of the problems in a marriage. Now, for a few minutes, we're going to cover this idea, what I'll call the Bible's dirtiest word, submit. Wives, submit to your husbands. There's a number of verses on this topic in Peter's writings and in Paul's writings. But I want to start off with Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 2. This is the most important verse in a discussion about this thing of submission. And walk in love, as Christ also has loved us and given himself for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God for a sweet-smelling aroma. Both times in Peter's writings and in Paul's writings, on the passages of things like, be a good citizen, children obey your parents, husbands love your wives, wives submit to your husbands, they start both of them with a reference like this, to this general idea of the love of God in giving us Jesus. And when you have experienced Jesus in your heart and you really do love him, that's one way you'll show it is you'll ask, how can I make the world a better place? What can I do? And the answer is, be a good citizen, respect human authority, be a good employee, be a good worker. They had slaves back then, but same idea today. And also, do your part in the home. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, submit to your husbands. Submit doesn't have to be a dirty word when it's understood rightly in the love of Jesus. It means don't do this despising. Don't push and push and push and push to get your own way. And the illustration I like to use to help women understand the value of it is to ask about Adam and Eve. God says, don't eat the fruit. And then when Satan asks Eve, can you eat the fruit? She says, we can't eat it. We also can't touch it. So who told Eve not to touch the fruit? It's not there in the first reference. And so my theory is maybe since God works through human authority and sponsors human authority when it's right, doing the right thing, maybe somehow Adam said, you know what, let's not even touch the fruit, just in case. True Christians do the speed limit, right? That's what I'm trying to say. A lot of basic laws, you're not going to find a speed limit law in the Bible. You're going to find a verse that says respect the government. So this idea then can become an illustration of submission, because when a woman submits to her husband, she's trusting in God, that God has inspired her husband with guidance in how to make the right choice. We get our next verse, a story of that exact same situation. Genesis chapter 31 is the story of Jacob. He's been away from the promised land for 20 years. Now he's being told to go back, and he's telling his wives about his experience. So this is Genesis 31 and verse 11. Then the angel of God spoke to me in a dream, saying, Jacob, and I said, here I am. And verse 13, I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now arise, get out of this land, and return to the land of your kindred. So he's explaining this to his wives. And Rachel and Leah, in verse 14, they answer him. They say, is there still any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? They've seen from conditions in their own lives that, you know what, things aren't working out where we are. So God appears to the man gives him a quest and then works also to give the woman evidence, but maybe not always the same. And so it's an act of trust. Submitting to the husband is an act of trust that God is working in the life of the husband. And of course, a man's quest should not be to command or demand that submission, should not be to emotionally or physically try to control the wife in any way. Job chapter 31. You want to be in the video, Oreo? You want to be in the video? When I made the video Fate versus Free Choice, I thought my kitty cat was about to die. And I had him in there. He's just off to the side here. I don't know if he wants to be on camera or not. But we got some medication for him. He's going to be around for a little while longer, and I'm very thankful. Okay, Job chapter 31, verse 9 and 10. If my heart has been enticed by a woman, or if I have lurked at my neighbor's door, then let my wife grind for another, and let others bow down over her. So, here we have a woman in a housewife role. A feminist might say, oh, she's just his sex slave. Well, his quest is to be worthy of her submission. And men have to remember that. That is what God wants, is each of us to in every way strive to help the other, support the other, and meet the needs of the other, and just understand what those needs are. In Deuteronomy chapter 21, we've got some rules and regulations as for when a man finds a woman in battle, that they're conquering a city. He wants to take one of the prisoners and have her as his wife. So chapter 21 of Deuteronomy, verse 14 says, and it shall be, if you have no delight in her, then you shall set her free. But you shall not sell her for money. You shall not treat her brutally, because you've humbled her. So again, rules and regulations. He did permit divorce, and then Jesus, said no, marriage is for life. But I just want to draw out this idea, the man getting tired of his wife. If he's got a wife who's despising him, and if, it kills the heart of a man. I don't want to blame women for every marriage problem. It's just, there's a great seminar, if you can get to it, Love and Respect, with Dr. Art Egerich. My wife and I went more than 20 years ago. And he talks about how there's got to be a balance, and how each has to meet the needs of the other and understand what those needs are. We have another aspect of submission, of course, that we do have to deal with, and that is Esther chapter 2. Then let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. And verse 14. In the evening she went, and in the morning she returned to the second house of the women, to the custody of the king's eunuch who kept the concubines. She would not go in to the king again unless the king delighted in her and called her by name. So this idea, let the young woman who pleases the king, it may sound sexist, but it's just a fact of life. Submit does mean, take the man's sexual needs into account. It's something that is not talked about a lot because Christians are always worried about, somehow promoting sin when they talk about it, and so they just usually dwell on the symbolism of Christ and the church, and the woman represents the church, and the man represents Christ, but just the physical is important, and it's not something to be denied, and when it's within the confines of a marriage, it's okay. Chapter 5 of Proverbs. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of your youth, as a loving deer and a graceful doe. Let her breasts satisfy you at all times, and always be enraptured with her love. When young people get married, they can't keep their hands off each other, right? They just feel so in love with each other. It's just a natural outflow of it. I went to a marriage encounter weekend and heard a story. A couple who had been married 50 years, they hadn't had sex in 38 years. They go to the encounter weekend and they feel so close to each other. It just naturally flows. It was the first time they'd had sex in 38 years. you can't deny the physical aspects. And it's not wrong. It does not say a man is not allowed to ever enjoy a woman's breasts. It's just he has to channel that desire in the direction of the one woman that God has given him. I'm as much of a pig as anybody else, right? I'm not trying to say I'm better than anybody else. Okay, so the life cycle of a marriage in summary. Usually, man sees a woman, he likes something in her, probably starts with her looks, but it's got to go deeper than that in order to work. And if he can make her happy, if he can somehow pay enough attention to her, work to win her heart, then she'll be the one to open up and receive his affections. And then the physical aspect comes in. But in time, of course, as a relationship progresses, arguments happen. This idea we drifted apart, submission also takes care of that in a way. If a woman will go along with the direction in life that a man wants, and yeah, sometimes men take advantage of it, often. But, God does want peace and harmony in the home. And sex is a big help. This breakdown happens often when the man stops paying attention to the woman and when the woman despises the man. So, the question I have to ask a man, and I'm asking men specifically this: if you're ready to give up on your wife because you're tired of her, what's going to happen? What are you going to do? You're going to try to get a new woman, right? And how are you going to do it? You're going to find a new woman you like, and you're going to put her through the process of paying attention to her, trying to win her heart. Well, why not just try it with the wife you have now? Why not just try one more time to work to win her heart? Again, not trying to say that every problem in a marriage is a woman's fault. Maybe that rebellion, maybe that despising is coming from a cry for help, a desire to have that love again. And maybe if you work to melt her heart, you'll still find that same sweetie pie you once knew. We'll go to the absolute worst story in the Bible, and we'll get an example of this. Judges chapter 19. But his concubine played the harlot against him and went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah, and was there 4 whole months. Then her husband arose and went after her to speak kindly to her and bring her back. The verse continues. Again, you read the whole story. It's a gruesome story. A woman gang raped to death. Concubine is a word for basically second-class citizen wife, extra wife. But still, this idea. She leaves him. He tries to get her back. How? By paying attention to her. I want to give you some plain, clear statements from the book of Malachi now on just how God really feels about divorce. Even though in John chapter 4, Jesus showed mercy to a woman who was on her 5th relationship. This is how God really feels. And this is the second thing you do. You cover the altar of the Lord with tears, with weeping and crying, so he does not regard the offering anymore, nor receive it with good will from your hands. Yet you say, for what reason? Because the Lord has been witness between you and the wife of your youth, with whom you have dealt treacherously. Yet she is your companion and your wife by covenant. But did he not make them one, having a remnant of the Spirit? And why one? He seeks godly offspring. Therefore take heed to your spirit, and let none deal treacherously with the wife of his youth. For the Lord God of Israel says that he hates divorce, for it covers one's garment with violence, says the Lord of hosts. Therefore take heed to your spirit, that you do not deal treacherously. So you work to win your existing wife's heart again, you'll have God's blessing. You go out to find a new woman, you won't. But again, John chapter 4. I didn't put that verse in the study. I'm going to ask you to read that whole chapter as a homework assignment. And you'll see his mercy to those who are on their 3rd, 4th, 5th failed relationship and really, really do hate themselves for it and really do want to try harder than ever before to make their marriage work. He will help you. I've got some advice now that I think each one of us can use in order to help all our relationships, not just our marriages, but every relationship, work, family, everything. This is Lamentations chapter 3, verses 22 and 23. Through the Lord's mercies we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Remember, when you take your marriage vows, you're marrying another person who's not perfect, and you are making a vow to give, not a vow to get. And everything Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount about turn the other cheek and love your enemies applies in the middle of an argument. And give your spouse new mercy every morning. A fresh start every day. That's how you can make a marriage last 37 years or longer. Our last verse is going to sum up this whole study. We could have just used this one verse only and made a 1-minute video, but I think it needed the elaboration to understand the depth of what this verse is all about. So we're finally going to get that reference in Ephesians. After you've seen the love of God that began chapter 5, now we get to how do I make the world a better place? Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. It's not proper Bible submission if a man says to his wife, hey, come and help me rob a bank. That's not God leading the husband. But now we get that other verse, verse 25. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. Which means self-sacrificing love, which means when you get despised, not giving up, offering that new mercy. And this is the way to make your home as close to a heaven on earth as you possibly can. God celebrated the first marriage. Thus, the institution has for its originator the creator of the universe. Marriage is honorable. It was one of the first gifts of God to man. When the divine principles are recognized and obeyed in this relation, marriage is a blessing. It guards the purity and happiness of the race. It provides for man's social needs. It elevates the physical, the intellectual, and the moral nature. The Adventist Home, page 25.